Hello friends, it's Michael from Fujifilm, and in this episode I'm going to talk about something kind of dull and boring. I'm going to talk about manual focus. Yeah, I hear all the screams out there, no, Michael, all we care about is AF. We need faster AF. We need more phase detection points. We want subject detection for everything in the universe. Yes, we know, but there are times where manual focus, A, could be more fun, B, it's more controllable, it could be faster. Also, we have made improvements into the menu system that give you some newer tools to help with manual focus since the last time I did this video several years ago. Also, in the cinema world, manual focus is done 99% of the time, okay? That's the way it is. And as our cameras have gotten so much better with video in cinema, this is becoming more of a topic of interest for those of you out there that might want to use our regular XF lenses or say our MKX lenses. But I'm also going to point out some of the aids that will help you even when using professional PL mount cinema lenses. So the first thing I would like to point out is that you can determine how the commands from the focus ring on our XF and XC lenses and GF lenses are interpreted by the camera in terms of rotation. So the lenses are not mechanical. They are electrically driven, so there are motors that are moving things back and forth. Yes, there are gears in there, but the behavior is all dictated by electronic commands sent from the focus ring back to the camera. This allows you to choose which way turning the lens makes the lens go farther and which way turning it makes it go closer. So it's clockwise, counterclockwise. This is very helpful for those of you coming from other camera systems into the Fujifilm world, and maybe your camera operated in a different direction. Another one is focus ring operation. By default, these lenses come out of the box and your camera is set to the non-linear mode. And what that means is the faster you turn the focus ring, the more it moves, okay? The distance of the elements is traversed in a greater length, okay? Faster turning, the more it moves. Slower turning, the less it moves. That's not necessarily predictable because it depends on acceleration. But we have a linear mode in here, and in linear mode, what happens is your lenses behave in a completely predictable manner every single time. So you can do an end point and a near point, an end point and a near point with the lenses, and they'll always come back to those same marks. So for those of you in the movie world, you really understand how this is a big help. Now, in some of the older cameras, you're going to find those two things I just mentioned in the button dial menu by itself. But on some of the newer cameras, instead, where you're going to find it is in button dial setting, but as a sub-menu called Lens Zoom Focus Setting. So once you've set that up to the way you like, something I want to point out is that it's really handy to be able to magnify the picture in the EVF or the LCD. And this gives you a much better way to critically evaluate focus, right? To be able to zoom in on the image. You're not cropping the capture, you're just zooming in on what you see. And we call that focus check. So on all the cameras that have a rear wheel that you can press in, that pressing in action is that little detent acts like a function button. And by default, when you press it in, it magnifies the picture. On some other cameras, like the XH cameras, it's by way of the autofocus joystick. You press in the joystick, it will zoom in. Press in again, it will zoom out. Or just by tapping the shutter button halfway, it'll zoom back out to normal. Something else that's cool is when you are in that magnified mode, by turning the back wheel, you can change the amount of magnification in a couple of steps. So you can make it tighter or not so tight. For cinema, for video, there's also, at least in the newer GFX, there's a mode where you can tell it to go back to normal mode as soon as you hit the record button, or to keep zoomed in. Now, it's not recording that way, it's just what it's showing you on the screen. There is a menu item labeled Focus Check, which is the name of this magnification behavior. And in the menu item, you can turn it on or leave it off. If you enable the focus check in the menu, then what it does is it takes this magnification behavior and makes it automatic as soon as you turn the focus ring. Yes, just the slightest little touch on the focus ring and the picture will zoom in into that magnified mode. So you need to decide whether you like that automatic behavior or not. I personally prefer to leave it off and do it manually. The next thing that I find very, very handy is something called focus peaking. So focus peaking is an electronic function that seeks out edges inside your frame, edges and areas of high contrast. Those are areas that are basically things that are sharp, and because they're sharp, that means they're focused. So focus peaking looks for those areas and illuminates them in a bright color. Okay, it puts a boundary around those edges. So you can choose what color you want. So in this one example, for example, outside where we have a building with a yellow wall, and there's that metal sun in the background, and in the front we have a tree. And if we want to change focus from the wall to the tree, we might not want to use yellow. Yellow may not be the best color for the outline. Maybe red is going to be better, or maybe blue is going to be better. Now, in this particular image, the sky was gray because it was overcast. But if it's a blue sky, maybe you want to use red for a blue sky. So choose the color that works best in your situation. Something else I think I want to point out to you is that my personal preference is to always choose the low setting. Each of those colors has a low and a high. What I find is that the high is very, very useful for really flat, very, very low contrast subjects, where it's really hard for you to make out the edges and you really want those borders to jump out at you. But in everyday situations, I find the high setting to be not discriminatory enough, okay? It doesn't give me the level of detail that I want. It kind of puts the outlines everywhere. So I prefer low, and I would suggest to you use the low for the focus peaking as well. The next one I want to talk about is something called the digital split image. This kind of recreates the look of old-fashioned rangefinder cameras. And in the center area of the image, the picture moves apart left and right. And this is especially helpful if you have verticals in the picture. Now, there is a way to operate this where that area in the center is just black and white, or you can set it up so that the area in the center is color. Another focus assist that we have is something called the micro prism. And this looks just like those cameras that we had back in the 60s and in the 1970s with optical ground glass. And there was a special area in there where the image kind of broke apart and took on sort of a granular crystallized look when it was out of focus. And then it would snap into clarity when you move the lens into the right position. Again, you should try this and see if you like it or not. On our newer cameras in the video mode, we now also have something called the focus meter. And this one is kind of clever, and I do like it. There is a focus meter by itself, and what it is, it gives you a little arrow indicator that tells you whether to turn the lens to the left or turn the lens to the right. Yes, the direction of the arrow will change depending on how you've set up the rotation of your lens. It's a quick way to guide you into getting into the right zone. You can also add peaking to this focus meter. So peaking and meter together is a really, really solid tool for getting autofocus very quickly. And the last thing I want to talk about is a new addition that came to GFX 100-2, again, only in video mode, is something called the focus map. And the focus map, it shows you in green whatever is sharp, and then in blue or orange if something is too close or something is too far from where it's where you currently have the focus set. You can try that and see if you like it. Another thing to look for in manual focus is something that's called the dual display mode. In dual display, you get to this by pressing the display back button on your camera, and that will scroll through different views on your screen, and eventually you will arrive to the dual display, where on one side you have the entire frame, and on the other side you have a magnified image. It's basically that focus check. Now again, you will only get dual display when the camera is in manual mode. You can't get to it when you're in autofocus. Now something I forgot to mention is that the focus check area, the magnified area, will follow wherever you have the box positioned in the frame. So what's normally the autofocus box. As that box moves around, the magnification follows with it. And it does the same thing in the dual display mode. So as you move the joystick around to move that box, that magnified square follows with it. Okay, I am now briefly going to bring up autofocus. The reason is that there is something that we have called AF plus MF. So now the camera would have to be in autofocus mode for what I'm talking about. And what this means is it allows you to briefly override whatever the autofocus is locked onto. So that means is if you half press your button on AFS mode, it locks onto something. You can grab the focus ring, and while you're still holding the button halfway down, you can manually focus. If you let go and half press again, it keeps being in autofocus mode. In autofocus continuous, okay, as long as you have the button halfway down, you can reach for the lens, turn it, tweak the focus to your particular liking, and after you let go, it will automatically refocus on its own when it's in continuous mode. So try that, see if you like it. This little gadget is called a follow focus device. It was made for the movie industry. This one happens to be a small version. They come much larger knobs on the side, and you can see there's a geared wheel here, and at right angles is this control knob. And what it was designed for was for cinema, because all cinema lenses have integrated metal gear rings for focus and zoom and aperture that allows them to be controlled by devices such as this. These also come in motorized versions for remote control. It happens to turn out that our GF lenses, the rubber ring on those GF lenses, happen to be the same pitch as those gears on follow focus mechanisms. That pitch, that design is called 0.8 M. So the rubber rings, even though they're shallow, actually match perfectly with those follow focus wheels. But you can turn any electrically driven lens into a geared lens by adding a ring such as this, or one such as this. Now this is a fixed diameter. It's made of a high-strength industrial rubber, and you buy the one that fits your particular lens. They're actually quite affordable. They're only about $2 each. This one here has a split in it and a gadget that allows you to make it bigger and smaller, and it catches and locks into place so one size can fit multiple lenses. The only downside is that this place where it connects, that can get in the way of full rotation of the lens. I happen to have one of those here on my XF1655 lens, and I leave it on there all the time, whether I'm doing stills or video, because I actually find it gives me a little more grip, a little more purchase when I am doing manual focus. And that can be especially handy in the wintertime when you're wearing gloves. Well, all right, that covers manual focus for now. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.